All right, High P families, welcome back to High P at Home. We have a very special episode today with the two Scotts. First, as always, partner in crime with me is Scott Dzinski. Scott, how you doing?
Cary, happy to be back, man. And we have a big guest on the show today. I'll tell you that.
And that guest will be our fearless leader, Mr. Scott Mebruer. Scott, what's up?
How's it going, guys? I don't know if I'm going to live up to that intro, but I will do my best.
I have no doubt in my mind this is going to be the best one yet. No pressure though. No pressure.
I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it.
So, Scott, we've had a lot of guests. We've done a lot of good stuff and been hearing a lot about people's journeys. And I think that's where we want to start with you. It's just starting out, how you got involved in volleyball. And I know it's a pretty similar story to a lot of us, but different than others. And how you got involved in the sport of volleyball and how you got to where you are now.
We're going to need to extend this out, I think, for a long time. This might be a 2-hour show. No, I kind of anticipated that would be one of the topics, and it was real easy. I think Scott was involved in the HR meeting this year when I talked about how I got introduced to it. I don't think Scott knew that prior to that HR meeting, but and the HR meetings that we do with our coaches can tend to vary. It's kind of one of those things that I go off the cuff on it. But, I think that it all started in my backyard. My dad had built a net that was converted from an old clothesline into a net because my sister, Ann, who played at Koryazu in the early 80s, that has a connection to your sister, Cary, was needing to work on her serving. So I became the individual that shagged all of her serves. As I got better at that, she led me on to believe that she would teach me how to pepper. So my younger sister Amy was involved, and so we would all go out in the backyard and pepper. And I grew up, basically watching my sister Ann at Koryazu. And again, in those early 80s, Koryazu was pretty good, very good, actually. Always tended to run into the buzzsaw of Incarnate Word, though. But being in Koryazu's gym, which I don't know if we actually ended up meeting each other long before we really knew each other, but I'm quite sure that between yourself and Brian Pichelle, we were running around the gym at Koryazu, enjoying that. But that led into the '84 Olympic team, and that was kind of my first experience watching that level of volleyball live. And obviously, for anyone at home that doesn't know, the '84 Olympics worked out pretty well for us. It was our first gold. And that led into '88 with another gold. And all of this kind of sparked the growth of boys volleyball across the country, the success of the men's team. And you started to see other areas of the country besides Hawaii and obviously Southern California kind of really find the game. And so that also led to boys volleyball in St. Louis, both in high school and in grade school via CYC, kind of start up. And one of the people that we grew up with, my older siblings, were the Mebrueries, and Ruth Ann Mebruer was a huge part of founding CYC and growing the sport there. So that was all the way through my grade school age, and then I was a part of obviously the first boys 14s team in the area in 1988. So went on to play at Vianney High School. We had a little bit of success there, and that led me to find the game of volleyball in college. And so I became more and more passionate with the sport. And for those who don't know my dad basically coached myself and my sister in almost every sport we played in grade school. And so that was good and bad. I have a lot of stories, and I definitely have some experience in how difficult it is to coach your own child via that in both sides of the spectrum. But I think that it's volleyball was the sport that I gravitated towards because I found that my dad knew the least about it. And so it was much more positive in terms of, yeah, Scotty, you're doing a great job out there. Keep it up, as opposed to, okay, let's get home, let's work on this, let's work on that. And so I think that added to it. And thankfully, my dad was able to be there as a part of my sports experience all throughout my life. And so that was probably a big part of why I wanted to get into coaching. I didn't know I wanted to get into coaching, but the individual on the other side of this is a part of kind of that first real experience with club coaching, which is Scotty. And I remember the first time after I got done with Lewis University, came back home. We had a little bit of success that year. We ended up going to the Final Four, and I was a part of that staff. And so when I came home, Scotty's brother Keith, who I played with at Vianney High School, same class of '93, said, "Hey, do you want to help out with this?" And he said, "You can pretty much run the practices if you want. I'm looking for help." And so I said, "Okay, I've never really run a practice." So I began to prepare for it. And I was so nervous. I still remember, I knew how talented the team was. And I remember Scotty running around the gym at Vianney High School when we were playing. So he had a lot of energy back then too. But I'm a little bit all over the place, but I think that kind of led into some success immediately. I can't, having success in high school, success in college, and being able to coach and have success in college, and then to kind of my first club experience as a coach was with Scotty's group. I was kind of spoiled, to be quite honest. Obviously, that team went on to win the first national championship in the Midwest at 16s. That wasn't a non-California team, was a pretty big deal. And, that just kind of snowballed. It became something that was in my blood. I loved playing and competing in the sport, but there was just something about getting in the gym and training kids that really resonated with me. And from there, a couple of years after that, we kind of formed High Performance. Quite a few Vianney alumni got together and said, let's go ahead and do this. So it kind of snowballed from there, and it's just kind of been something that's went from a passionate hobby to obviously something that consumes my life.
Yeah, one of the cool things is you're taking all of our questions here, Scott. You got to leave us a couple here. No, that's the biggest thing. First time I ever saw you was obviously running around at Vianney, playing with my brother. And I know I told this story with Murphy, but I saw you in the weight room the first time. And I said, who's this freaking animal in here? He's like squatting like 290 pounds. And then he runs onto the court and just starts thundering balls inside of Vianney High School. And yeah, tell us about those Vianney teams, because, man, that was my first experience watching high-level volleyball, and I was just absolutely blown away. Really remember watching state championship at the time. Tell me if I was wrong, but it's at Forest Park Community College, and it was just all the courts together, and everybody came there, and it was like, wow, this is unreal.
Yeah, I think the tournament back then was obviously vastly different from what it is today. It was an actual single-day event. I think my senior season at Vianney, we had converted into more of the format that you see today. Multi-day bracket format, districts, all that stuff. And so back then it was obviously, from a sports standpoint, it was still growing. So there wasn't enough teams really to kind of dig into that. But it's obviously Vianney High School was something, and I realize, I'm never going to be the greatest person to talk to our kids about preparing them for the correct decisions to make in terms of their futures, because every decision I made was, I love volleyball. I want to play volleyball. And that's basically what led me to Vianney High School. Now, I'm happy to know that, the education I got there was obviously top notch, but, I was the only individual from my grade school that went to Vianney High School. And it's like, that's where I want to go. The year before that, they won state, and, I knew they were good, but, I was luckily a part of one of probably the best teams that Vianney's ever had, which is that 1991 team. I was a sophomore on that team, and we were absolutely loaded. I think everybody, as I was kind of thinking back, because everybody talks about how great I was back then, and I'll admit I was good, but the level of athletes today just don't compare. I would be lucky to maybe make our 18s team. The athletes back then were good. They were probably more well-rounded and better all-around athletes because we played every sport. But that team was very, very talented. I would not put it up against any team that Scotty played on, from the Vianney classes, but it was great. It was an incredible experience being a sophomore on that team. I think there was only one other individual that played on that team that wasn't a senior. But it was a really formative experience, and I can't say enough about how the seniors kind of took me under their wing. I think my entire career, I was, back then obviously good, but I was playing with individuals that were 4 and 5 years older than me, and they would seek me out and say, "Hey, we're going to play doubles somewhere. Do you want to play?" And I would play. If there was a day that I could play, I played. I think the next year at Vianney 92 was something that we had lost our head coach, Jeff Gabbert, and that was a big loss. Larry Fuhr, who I will always say great things about, because he was the individual that let me in the weight room every single day in June, July, and August to kind of help me prepare, and was always really handled the understanding that he didn't know everything. And so he relied on the individuals that knew more, and he wasn't afraid to allow us to take more control over it. And I took quite a bit of control, but that 92 season was the last year of that tournament, Scotty, and it was grueling. You started at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I think we left at about 7:30 at night. I think we played 6 matches in the day, and it was brutal. It was in Forest Park, and back then it wasn't necessarily as great as it is now. So it was humid in there. It was in May in St. Louis, which I think every year it gets cooler in St. Louis than it did back when we were playing. But I can't. I'm always hesitant to say how great our teams were back in that era, but I know that the athletes were really great athletes. I just don't think they would be able to compete with how specialized everybody is today and the experience that these kids have, because they've been playing since they've been 8, 9. So I think I always think that the most recent class is better, but
Scott, I was I was at that 92 tournament. I was a freshman, and I was not playing until 7:30 that night. We lost a couple hours before that, but I remember sticking around to watch. I mean, that was such a cool experience, because especially for me being a 15-year-old, I was already a volley nerd at that point. And just to be able to watch, you got the guys in your class especially, and then to get to see some of the guys that came from Kansas City and things like that, it was pretty awesome. But I think, you brought up, I've been spending so much time during the pandemic going back and YouTubing, the 84 Olympics and, the 86 World League and just the evolution of the game has been crazy, and you kind of brought it up. Like, you can't compare eras. I think it's just like any other sport. can't really compare eras, but the skill level back then was, and you see a lot of the same things. I think the interesting question for me, especially working with, high level boys and girls volleyball and how those two sports have affected each other. What do you think has been the biggest part of the evolution of the sport, and what's been the biggest part that's changed?
I just I think you can count on one hand the number of big changes in the sport over the last 40 years. I think the two-person receive back in the 80s with Karch and Aldis and obviously Stavertlik. I think that was a huge change in the game. I think obviously the incorporation of the back row attack, the speeding up of the back row attack, the change in the emphasis of serving. I think those are the big ones. Obviously, the libero is a physical change to the game positionally. But I think I just rattled off 5 right there, and I don't know if there's really anything significant beyond those. You appreciate how difficult it was to two-person receive back in the 80s, but you did not have these jump servers bombing serves, and it is physically impossible to pass two-person receive. I'm sure Karch will tell you the same, with what serving has become. And obviously that's a part of the let serve, but the physicality may be something that isn't necessarily a change in the game, but I just think that the further development in all the sports of how these athletes are more physically fit, more explosive, more just the strength, everything that they are doing is just, I just think at a different level, which I think just accentuates all the other changes that we talked about. I think that professional sports in general, it's become, everybody realizes that it is something that if I can keep my body in the top physical shape that I can play for a long time at a really high clip. And I think that that change just sees some of these individuals have longer careers and they're at their peak longer. I don't know if that's probably the answer that you thought I'd say, but I just think that the physicality of the athletes today, their fitness, their strength, all of that stuff is, I think, just significantly higher.
I'm going to keep it right there. I wanted to go somewhere else, but you brought up a really cool thing that I like to ask a lot of high-level coaches out there. If there's any rule change you'd like to see change out there, what would it be, or something that you would love to see implemented coming up? I've always been a big fan of, probably because I hit a ball off the antenna during the national championship match in 2004, but a ball hits the antenna and it's not out. You actually played off the antenna, something like that. But is there something that you thought, adding another line or something like that?
I think in a fever dream, I always kind of imagine just eliminating front and back row and just seeing what that looks like. I think that's the craziest type of thing that I could come up with. But in all actuality, I mean, the rule that I'd love to see change, and I think it impacts just the frustration that we have as coaches and that players have right now, is that anytime you go in to step in to set a ball, I just don't understand why, as developed as we are as a sport in this day and age, why we need to call a double contact. I think that there's a lot of purists out there, and I played in the era where, it was real scoring and you had to serve on the right side of the court and everything else. And so I believe you have to adapt. I think that there's a lot of benefits in adapting, but I just believe we're so much more skilled than we were. And I don't think anybody is gaining some advantage on a double contact. So I just like to see that go away. I think that it puts the emphasis on us in the younger ages in terms of developing athletes and skill to not necessarily adhere to that rule in terms of how we train it and to be more demanding of the skill. But every athlete that plays at our level in the high school age group, I just think is very skilled. And so there's really no advantage to it. I don't think anybody's doing it and gaining an advantage.
Totally agree on that too. And that's one thing that I've heard that from a lot of different coaches. And that's one thing as well is towards the latter part of a set, they never call it anyway. So why call it in the first place?
That's the frustrating part, because as a coach, it's something that can ebb and flow throughout a match, and that shouldn't happen. If it's a rule at point 1, it's a rule at point 20. It's the same rule at point 125. Sure. And so I think that's the frustrating part. And I think it adds to just having our athletes gain more confidence. And I hate to see officials, and I have a lot of friends that are officials, but I hate to see officials impact the match in that way. I don't think that's really what we've envisioned.
Scott, I don't want to, put you out here, but I feel like you're stealing my idea of taking away the 3-meter line and putting in the 1-meter line and just let everybody attack. But that's my fever dream. No front row, no back row, 5 players coming in on patterns would be amazing.
Sure. Just free hockey line changes, I think that there are other creative things that I've heard where just everybody's all-time front row or back row, and you don't even have to rotate. I think those are things that everybody's kind of talked about and heard. I don't like how specialized the game has gotten. I think there's something to being well-rounded, and that's why I think we always push the outdoor game so much, is because the benefits of being well-rounded and skilled in all 6 phases of the skills, I think is really important to be really good at the highest level of the game. So some of these ideas look great in terms of our mad scientist, what would it look like approach, but I wouldn't want to see that actually change.
So I want to do a little bit of a deeper dive. You talked about your playing career a little bit and about your group and how, I can tell you from my perspective, I remember being in Chicago and we would be at a different playing site and we'd be done playing. And I'd be like, me and Dan Bodeker would be like, Mom, we got to go watch Mike and play. We got to go watch the older guys play. And we'd sit there and watch you guys. I remember, I have vivid memories of you guys. What was the Canadian team you guys always played? Was it Thunderbirds?
Thunderbirds, yes.
Yeah.
And I actually ended up playing with 2 of those guys in college as a flyer. So they were unbelievable. And if you were at that match, I think that there's only like a few moments in time where I look back on my career and think of, holy cow, I wanna be that person, or I want to play like that. I'm gonna steal probably your question here and hijack it a little bit, but I want to go back to when I was, with that in mind. I think it's still happening. Our kids are going to watch the older athletes, and that's still something that's going on. That hasn't changed over the years. I think it's still one of those exciting things when we're able to see our younger athletes go watch our older athletes. I think that those things are incredibly inspiring to understand the impact that, our older athletes have on our younger athletes. But back in the day, and this kind of inspired us to have our alumni tournament back 15 years ago, was these college athletes would come home during the winter break. And back then, the men's, the adult game was really, really good in St. Louis, really good. Steve Stark, Tom Barry, that whole crew, the Pounds and all those individuals kind of grew the game. John Rogers was a part of that. And there was so at this tournament was held at Afton High School. This is, again, why I believe that Afton is the mecca of volleyball in St. Louis. But at Afton High School, this tournament was happening every Christmas time, vacation area. And these athletes would come in, and Vinny and Johnny Believa and Kevin Mullersman, and the athletes I already talked about, John Rogers, Tony Looning. Tony Looning still, I think, the best player I've ever seen at that type of stage. But these individuals were playing, and all of a sudden, they were warming up. And I got to see Jeff Barnett. I got to see these guys just do, they just started warming up, and, obviously a bounce occurs, and everybody's like, oh, okay. Yeah. And then another bounce occurs, and these individuals are flying. I mean, their shoulders are over the net, and they're just crushing the ball. And then Tony Looning and Jeff Barnett decide to get into a bounce competition, and they're just bouncing balls into the rafters at Afton High School. And I'm just, my jaw's on the floor, and I'm like, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do. And watching them play back then, the athleticism was just ridiculous. It was really inspiring to watch that. And obviously, what I was getting to before, and I kind of lost my train of thought a little bit in terms of these moments, but Thunderbirds, these individuals, and the bleachers, I think, are about 30 feet high against the wall at Illinois Benedictine College, where a lot of those matches were held at AAUs up in Naperville, and which I think is actually Lyle. But these individuals are just snapping balls off, bouncing over the bleachers up against the wall, and everybody on the team was doing it. And we were getting ready to play this team, and we had already seen them warm up just a lot of times. Just like, just hope nobody gets hurt out here, But those individuals, still one of the most impressive teams. They had 6 players on the roster. All 6 played all the way around the entire tournament, and it was just incredible to watch.
Yeah, those are cool times, man. This is why we had the podcast, Cary. This is what we're talking about, dude. No, I want to obviously bring it up a little bit here, and I talked to Cary before this about coming on board, and obviously my coach 16, 17s, 18s years. I leave to go out to California, and Missouri Thunder starts to just go like this, but then high performance obviously opens up. And I know it was a bunch of, Vianney guys who came together, but I want to know the real story. Like, where did it happen? Where was the first talk? How did you guys get the idea to start up this club that has grown to be one of the biggest, obviously, in the whole entire United States of America?
Yeah, I think I kind of, you kind of talk about that, and there's a lot of emotions that go through me, and one's regret. I think I've had this conversation with a few people, and I was a young guy. I was 24 years old, hadn't even turned 25 yet, but, and I had some experience. I was still coaching at Lewis University in Chicago, and I was directing the Flyers Club out of that school. So I had some experience directing, albeit it was a year or two. So it really wasn't a whole lot. But Jeff Gabbert, Matt Koitzer, Brian Pichelle, myself, and then some of the younger guys, John Yealing, Jay Hilsing, were kind of a part. I think a lot of us were in my backyard in the pool. And I think it might have been after like Spiking It or something, or one of those Spike Fest things. And, if you've ever been around Jeff Gabbert, all I will say is, you cannot leave that conversation without talking about volleyball and stories and the history. And, even if it's the same stories we talk about over and over and over again, with Jeff, it's always like it was the first time. And his passion for the game is absolutely contagious. And so a big reason why we're all here right now is because of Jeff. And so Jeff, for those that don't know, is a longtime coach of Vianney High School, who left us for 1 year, actually 2 years, my junior and senior years, which I blame him for us not winning 3 years in a row at Vianney, but he wasn't there my junior year, so I can't necessarily say that. But it's those individuals we were all coaching different clubs. I was with Missouri Thunder. I think Brian was with CYC coaching the girls. Koitzer was with CYC coaching the girls. Gabbert was coaching the boys at CYC. And I think there might have been another club or something that we were both kind of helping out with. But, we just sat around and was like, wouldn't it be great if we could all just hand these teams off to one another? Knowing that if we're coaching this team at 14s and I was handing it off to the team to Jeff, who's coaching 15s, which it was 16s back then because there weren't individual age groups. But wouldn't it be great if we didn't have to start from ground zero every year in terms of making sure the kids knew how to serve? And, that's always a big one for us, but knew how to pass the ball and not have to reteach everything. And so that was always something over 2-3 years that whenever we got together, we just like, I had to fix this today. How can somebody still be goofy footed after playing the sport for 6 years? How is that possible? And I think those types of conversations just kind of kept coming. And we were all at Missouri Thunder actually the year before this kind of happened. Gabbert came over. Koitzer was over, Brian, obviously, myself, and and this kind of gets into the regret part. I never really appreciated how much, Ron and Zach and everybody involved put into, it with their kind of, when you're running a club, it's more than just, we're not doing it for the money. And so I think that type of stuff, looking back on it, that's probably my biggest regret, that we didn't handle that the right way. I think it was just a situation where some parents approached us. They had some issue with something. It was kind of a perfect storm of the parents that were Vianney parents approached these Vianney alum and said, hey, would you guys be interested in doing it? And my fiance at the time, I had no interest in doing it. And that didn't work out well between us, but that's probably the best thing from our relationship that I took away, is that she pushed me to do it, and said, you should do it. You're good at it. I think you'd enjoy it. And so that's kind of how it happened. It wasn't some massive plan that we all had that was just like, all right, here's our opportunity. It was really somebody else asking us to do it. We had been talking about it for years, and we just said, let's do it. But I like I said before, my regret is not handling it the right way. And I wasn't the ringleader of it by any stretch of the imagination. It was just, all right, everybody is doing it. They're all my friends. These are the people that I hang out with. These are the people that I spend most of my time with. If they're doing it, I'm doing it. They need me to direct the club. And that's really how it happened. There isn't anything more to it than that. But, it's kind of grown over the years, obviously. We started with 3 boys teams, and all of those individuals I just said were involved in coaching those teams. And so it just kind of kept growing.
So knowing what you know now about where the club is and the growth and the success and all that, I want you to think about what your vision was, or if there was a vision, and could you imagine it would have gotten here? And then I guess second part of the question is, where do you see it going from here?
I'm not sure if I understand completely in terms of the vision side of things, because I've made it clear in this that volleyball has kind of pulled me into my decisions. And so I really think until maybe the late 2000s, it really was something that was, I love this. I love doing it. And I was an engineer at Verizon throughout most of the 2000s. And so I was working about 60 hours a week as an engineer for them and traveling across the country, and then trying to figure out how to direct a club that had grown to almost 20 teams at the time, which, you find yourself on some days you're working 100-hour work weeks between the two. And so it was something that I was passionate about because I loved it. But it was never something that I had this plan of, this is what I'm going to do with my life. it really became, and again, it was parents. I was actually set to move to Chicago, to basically work on my career at Verizon, management track opportunity where they were going to groom me for something. And so I was looking at having to move. And so I had told the parents, about 9 months out that, hey, I'd love to see this continue. I'm not sure who can take it on, but we were not really organized as officially as we are now. It was basically a DBA that was out of my bank account. And, so they took over, basically turning us into a 501c3, organizing the club, and began to search for a director to replace me. And I think it was maybe May of that year, which I was set to depart after the season. They approached me and said, "Is there any way we could get you to stay?" And again, these are a group of parents that basically said, "This is the offer, and can we get you to stay?" And I'm like, I would love to do this as like my job. I just don't know how it's possible. And they said, "Well, give us a number that," I was like, "Well, again, I'm not doing it for the money." I'm like, these are my bills. This is my debt. This is how much I pay in rent. I'm like, if you can make sure I can just live, then I'm in. And so I took a 70% pay cut from being an engineer at Verizon, and began doing this full time. And so again, I think people are confused at my decision making when they hear all of this right now, because most people are like, "Scott, what are you doing?" Well, I just looked at it as, if I could do this, why would you ever retire? So there's no need to retire. I'm already doing what I'd be doing if I was retired. So it doesn't really matter. And so, as I get older, I hear what they're saying, and some of those things are more real today, but it's still the same decision for me. If I'm doing this when I'm 80 years old, it's retirement for me. That's what I would want to be doing. So, but there was no master plan or vision. I think the only thing that's changed over the years is that I've had this a goal of trying to see the first real facility kind of be built specifically for volleyball in the area, and it has consumed me most of the last 6 years to try to make it happen. And so beyond that, I think it's really been trying to make sure that we as an organization are trying to do what our mission is, and that's basically to put these kids in a position to love the game, to reach their full potential, and obviously through that process just become better people.
I think people will realize now how much love you have for the club, obviously, and that's a big thing, because this thing doesn't go. And I've talked to a lot of great club directors, and you're at the top of the list, or definitely the top, that none of them make a lot of money doing this job. They love the kids, they love the parents, they love the sport, and it does consume them. But, monetarily, that's not the biggest thing in the world, and we all appreciate what you do for us. I'll tell you that, Scott. One thing that I want to get back to is obviously when you started the club and getting to where it's at today, you said obviously the vision is to one day see the first volleyball facility built here.
Yeah.
There's nothing here obviously like that, and very few places, even the United States of America, have them, except for maybe California and Chicago a little bit. Here and there, Texas.
I'm more and more surprised every day at how many places have their own facilities. Now they may not have built it ground up. They may be leasing spaces, but I think if you're leasing a space, you have a facility. And so I think, I classify it: are you renting? Are you leasing? Did you build it? And I think that those are the variations of it. I think there's very few people that built a facility. I think there's a lot of clubs out there, more than ever, that are leasing their own facilities, but still a vast majority are probably renting space.
Yep. And I guess that's the main question, is building it ground up, or do you get to house all of our locations inside of that, or is it, hey, that's our best spot and that's our main core that we have pretty much at the STL location?
So, and this gets into, I think, something I've been talking about for the last 2 years with the club. And, you know, obviously we purchased a piece of ground in Maryland Heights that our plan was to build on. And that still may be what we end up doing. I can't tell you how relieved I am to not have built that facility this past year and have spent, $10 million on building a facility. We've been saving for 20 years to make that happen. And there are some hurdles in our region that other regions don't necessarily have. And it makes it more difficult for that to occur. So scaling up the club, offering all of these other services and programs, running tournaments, running camps and clinics, fundraising, all of those things have led us to be able to do something like that. And in that process, Powerplex kind of happened. We were tracking it, as that became more clear to me that was going to happen, it became the question to myself as we could do this ourselves, but we'd be competing with something that we can't really compete with, in terms of the full experience. Now that full experience may not happen in year 1 or 2, but the vision that Dan Buck has, I'm a complete supporter of. I think that I know that's going to happen. And so I think that while there have been delays, more delays than all of us really care for, we couldn't have built a 26 court volleyball facility. And I think that being a part of something like that, I'm not an egomaniac. I think that some people would say I just want my own. I think that I always have to be looking at the best interests of the club long term. And this is another one of those decisions that just kind of worked out for us, and not building our own facility and having a $10 million note that we have to figure out how to come up with $400,000 this year to pay off. I think is I can't imagine. We're already dealing with a lot of stress. I can't imagine having that on top of it right now. We're in a great position with all of our partners. I can see us one day getting to that place, and we have the land there if we want to use it and build on it. I don't know if I've answered the question completely, Scotty, but I think that for us, it's we're always trying to manage to keep the club as affordable as we can, while putting the club in a position to secure itself and be able to maintain what we have. And so I think that's where we're at, and we're in a great position because of those decisions, quite frankly. So I think that's where I'm at with it. We're always looking for good opportunities. We've been looking for something in Illinois for our Illinois program. That's really that kind of the last piece of it. Some good stuff is happening there. We really hope that something more can be said about it very soon. Progress is happening. But I think that's the last piece for me to give Abby and the Illinois program something that they can have a home. So I think that's always something that I'm aware of. But
you answered it better than my question at hand. That was great.
Let's tie a bow on this by doing Scotty's favorite part of the podcast, the real heavy hitting questions. You mentioned that kind of right out of the gate, you had a lot of success and got to coach a lot of great players, and that's continued for 25 years or whatever it is.
Oh, you are not going to ask me about who I think the best players are.
No, I know that you would never have favorites, but okay. I want to go situationally, right? I want to go, hey, we're in a national championship match. Who are you setting on match point?
Scott Dzinski.
Scott Dzinski?
Huh? Every time.
Who's the setter?
Kyle Foley.
Oh, wow. That's I like that. That name was not one of the names I thought you were going to say, but yeah, Kyle was awesome.
There's a lot of good ones, but I tell you what, that kid was physically gifted, talented, confident, and there was never a moment that was too big for him. Quick little Kyle story. So I'm coaching 17s. We're in a match on day 3. We win this match. We're in the gold division. Okay, so we're top 5. And we hadn't really been into the gold division in a little bit of time. And that was a very talented group. Jake Duckworth, Palizzi, Gettinger, Kyle, Mitch Penning, Tommy Beckman, Leininger, all those guys were on that team. And so it was a great squad. We were up 14 to, I believe, 9 in set 3 against, I'm not sure if it was Seaside or Wave, because I think a few of the coaches went over to Wave in about that same time frame. But it was a San Diego club. And we're playing this team. It was Brendan Dean's team. We're playing this team, and we're up 14-9 in set 3, and it's like, game's over. It's like, all right, we go the matchup route. Tommy's on the right side. He's hitting over a pin that's 6 foot. Tommy's 6'6", and it's like, hey, let's go to Tommy. And we go to Tommy, or we didn't get the pass, and so we're out of system. And all of a sudden, we found ourselves into a second timeout, and it's 14-13. And I just kind of said, okay, we have great options in every position. Kyle, whatever you feel is your choice, let's go to it. We had not set the middle a single ball in that run. Michael Palizzi, who's all of 6'1", but he played way bigger than that. He's still one of the best M2s that we've ever had. And so Mike's in the front row. We pass the ball to 12 feet, and Kyle shoves a gap into Mike Palizzi, and he just snaps down on it. And I'm just like, that is unbelievable confidence. It's that type of a moment. And Kyle is younger. Kyle's a sophomore. He was playing up, and so seeing him kind of respond in that moment, I'm just like, oh my God. But there's so many good ones, Cary, that maybe if the question was asked how good they were in high school versus how good they became, I think that's probably, it could potentially be different. It probably isn't in that position, but you have guys like Keith Schunzel and those types of individuals. Zach Young, Zach Young is probably still one of the best I've ever seen at that position. Kyle, I think, just is as good as Zach Young, but he's a few inches taller than Zach Young.
So that's a great story. I think I was there. I was definitely there the next day. But let's go back to you as a player, because I don't know how many people know that you were all around volleyball player. We talked about the Thunderbirds and the Ironman volleyball, and you were setting and attacking. Who did you want setting you in the big games?
We had some good ones, obviously. At Vianney High School, it was Chris Hensley. And, Chris was a great high school guy. Matt Heiligenstein set for us, through pretty much my entire club career. I mean, there was a core group of guys that from 14s all the way through 18s were on the team together. Tony Byzantine, Matt Heiligenstein, myself, Mike Bodeker. That core group of guys played together from 14s all the way to 18s. It was kind of funny when we were younger. We ran that 6'2", and it was basically Matt and I set each other the entire time. We kind of go back in time on some of this stuff, and we realize, it can be hard to displace people that you've been playing with or that have been a part of the team. And you've all experienced it, right? But back in the day, Kevin Sapp, who's a longtime men's player in the region. We had two 18s teams that year, and Kevin was on one. I was on the other, and Kevin's set for that team, and he's probably the best setter in the area at that point. Tony Bichelle was also in the mix there, but I would say Kevin would be the guy, and I never played with him.
Wow. Now let's put yourself in Kyle Foley's shoes, and coach says, make your best decision at match point. Who do you want to set?
The middle. I love to set them.
Well played. Well, Scott, I really appreciate you doing this. This was a lot of fun. You and I thoroughly enjoyed talking about the old days, and I know we got into talking about the club, and it's really cool to bring up a lot of those names, and especially thinking about that 92 tournament and sweating my butt off for all day. And
it's brutal.
Yeah, but really appreciate your time, and thanks for doing this.
Thanks, Scott.
I had a lot of fun, guys, and like I said, I could do this for another 2 hours, but it's time to get back to work.
I think that's our next one, man. We get everybody in. We get Gabbert. We get the founding fathers.
We may have to keep that one private.
We don't have a dump button yet, so we might have to. All right, guys. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.